All right, hi everyone. We've got another discussion video here. Today we're going to be talking about something that might hinder your learning process. So I think it's something that people should be aware of. And it's that if you tell someone you're about to learn a skill, you can dramatically reduce your chances of actually learning that skill. And you might think, well, how does that make sense? And it all comes down to validation, which is something we've talked about on the channel before, especially in the imposter syndrome video. And the validation comes into play where you reward yourself early for doing work that hasn't actually been done yet. So let's take the example of learning a language. I'm sure many of you have had friends, or maybe you yourself have done this, where someone says, I'm going to learn X language, say Japanese, for example, and then a few days on from then, they've completely given up. And you might think, well, maybe they've lost interest, and that's probably not the case, because clearly if you have a choice between understanding a language and not understanding a language, you would choose the first. The issue quite often lies at the very beginning, where the first thing they did was tell someone that they wanted to learn the language. It's seeking validation and early reward, because what happens is when you tell someone that you're going to learn something, you think that's a step already taken on the path to learning it. In reality, you've done nothing. You've just made your intentions clear. But the very thought that you've put effort in to learning that skill means that you're in a position and you have an excuse to reward yourself. And quite often the reward chosen for cases like this is to stop putting in effort. Oh, I've done enough for today, so I can take a break and do something else. And then days go by and no more work is put into it. I was first made aware of this psychological quirk by Derek Sivers in a short TED talk called Keep Your Goals to Yourself, which I highly recommend watching. Derek Sivers is quite an interesting person. He's an entrepreneur and he's got a lot of gems of wisdom to share with people. He's also written a very small book called Anything You Want, which I highly recommend reading. In that talk, he name drops a few people that have done some work relating to this issue. So I recommend looking into it for yourself because this might lead to some interesting self-reflection. As a community manager, I see this quite a lot. There's a lot of cases where people get excited about the idea of learning something. So the first thing they want to do is tell absolutely everyone that they're going to learn it, and then they'll give it up the next day, which is quite disappointing, and I don't want them to be disappointed. So occasionally I make them aware that this is a psychological thing that everyone tends to deal with. And it's something that can confuse people to start with because it sounds counterproductive. A lot of people fall into the trap of thinking that if you tell someone your plan to do something, then that becomes its own source of motivation because you don't want to let them down and you don't want to look stupid, so you want to carry it on. But, newsflash, humans are stupid. That doesn't really work. I mean, sure, pressure imposed by other people once you've made your plans known can be a good source of motivation for carrying you through learning new skills, especially in highly competitive contexts. But that's not very reliable. And it really depends on your sensitivity to what other people think of you. If you're highly sensitive to what other people think, then the motivation that comes from the pressure for you to succeed will probably be higher. Whereas if you don't care what people think, then it will be lower. So this may be the only situation where I say to people, maybe it's good to have a sensitivity to what other people think, even though I've spent a lot of time telling people to just completely ignore other people's opinions. There's always exceptions. So is there an official term for all of this? I don't think so. I mean, there might be that I'm just not aware of, but I think that an appropriate term for the sensation of being rewarded early could be premature validation. I mean, that's what I want to call it, but Google clearly isn't ready for that term, so we're going to call it something like preemptive validation instead. So what do you do if you want to learn a new skill, but you're worried about failing by tricking yourself with some strange psychological quirk? Well, you just do it. Just don't tell anyone, do it entirely under your own motivation, just have fun. And if you feel like you've got enough momentum, then show people something that's come about as a result of you learning that new skill. Say in the context of 3D artwork and stuff like this, say you want to learn sculpting or rigging or modeling. Don't tell people that you're going to learn one of those things. Just learn it and then show people something that's been created because of that skill. Say if I was going to learn rigging, I'm not going to tell people, hey, I'm going to spend a while learning rigging. I'm just going to make something with that rigging skill and then show that to people. And then they'll go, oh, okay, so you've been learning rigging. They can make that connection. So you're not rewarding yourself early for telling people that you're going to learn something. You're actually rewarding yourself for producing something to show people. And I think that's a lot healthier. Now, I can already see the comments. Of course, there's going to be tons of exceptions to this phenomenon. If you're in institutionalized education and you're going to be learning skills, of course, you're going to be telling your friends and family before you pick them up, and it's not going to affect it whatsoever. But that's because there's tons of external factors happening there, and it's part of an organized process. But what we're talking about here is more the case of if the motivation purely comes from the self, if there are no external motivators where you are responsible for following through with learning this new skill, that sense of responsibility and commitment to yourself is highly volatile, especially when bringing in validation from other people. Okay, so what about if you're not learning a skill, but you have lots of ideas and you can't wait to share them with people? Should you keep them quiet? And I think it really depends. This is something I think about quite a lot because as an inconsistent YouTuber in terms of subject, because we do artwork, we do programming stuff, we do discussions, we do all sorts because the interest is so varied, I always worry about bringing in and actioning out new ideas too early and having them just dead in the water from the get-go. Because some things require preparation, then you need to be aware of the kind of preparation that's required before you make it aware to the world. Because when presenting an idea, the feedback that you get from other people and the validation you get from other people will quite likely decide the fate of that idea. Does it come into fruition or does it immediately fade into nothing? So a lot of the ideas I have for long-term plans for projects, I keep completely private. I don't tell anyone, not even my closest friends or anything. Some ideas eventually trickle down and I will share them with some members of the close community that I'll get their feedback on. And then from there, if I feel like they're appropriate enough for the audience, then I'll make a judgment on what I'm most interested in and work from there. Some people are the other way around, and I feel like some of you watching may consider yourself to be in this category, that as soon as you have a bright idea, the first thing you want to do is tell absolutely everyone. And maybe the idea just like withers into nothing, maybe it goes somewhere. Maybe you wonder to yourself why you have so many ideas but you can never finish any of them. And there are loads of reasons why that might be the case, and we could do a whole discussion video about that, but this could be one of them. I feel like if you're someone that needs help either finishing projects or learning new skills and has commitment issues, this is something that you should be thinking about. Preemptive validation. Another interesting thing to think about is how this might tie into procrastination. Those of you that have been around for a little while know that I've already done a video on procrastination, and a lot of that's actually tied into self-rewarding as well. For example, say you have to write an essay and you really don't want to do it, and you keep tabbing away to Reddit or YouTube and looking at that much more interesting content. Eventually you might sum up the willpower just to write another sentence, so you tab back in, you write the sentence, well done, you've achieved something, you've given yourself an excuse to take a break, you tab straight back into YouTube. In reality, you haven't done much. You've only done one sentence, you've got like several pages left to go, you're rewarding yourself too early. And that's what this is, preemptive validation. I feel like there's connections between these issues and not very obvious solutions to them. So do I have a solution for you? No, I don't. I'm sorry. I can just see people clicking away now. No, I think part of the solution lies in being aware of what's happening. Because I'm sure there are many people that run themselves in cycles. Oh, I have a great idea. I want to learn this. I fail. I have a great idea. I want to learn this. I fail. And they never get anywhere. And they're just stuck in this frustrating cycle and they're not sure why. Being aware of what's happening in your mind, how you're rewarding yourself, how your emotions change, how your motivation changes. I think this awareness is a good first step in finding a solution to the problem. And you know what? Maybe something else to think about is that maybe the conditions just aren't right yet. Maybe you want to learn something or you want to work on this new project and you decide to tell your friends and wholeheartedly you're not thinking about receiving validation whatsoever, you're just putting it out into the world, and yet you still fail. Maybe there are other external factors that aren't being considered. And I think in situations like these, a lot of people wait for the conditions to be perfect before doing that thing, rather than actually trying to make the conditions perfect themselves. For example, I want to learn the guitar, but I don't feel like I'm in the right mood. Or I need more time. Or I want to wait until this other thing's done before this. These are all excuses that will have no end. On the surface level, we will tell ourselves that there is an end to these excuses, but in reality, there isn't. Because think to yourself, how many years have you told yourself that you wanted to learn this specific skill, and all this time has gone by and there's always been another excuse, and yet there's still more excuses, and you haven't started. The conditions will never be perfect, and this isn't necessarily to do with validation, it's you putting up roadblocks for yourself. So the solution in this case may be to actually learn to identify what the conditions are, and learn to take steps to change them, even if those conditions are entirely something that's psychosomatic. Now, I'm not a psychologist or a therapist, so I don't think you should take my advice too literally. but I'm just sharing my opinions because I find this entire subject fascinating. As someone with a highly creative and variable audience and community, it's extremely interesting seeing how different people take different approaches to learning new skills and working on new projects. And I hope that some of this interest rubs off on you in these discussion videos. But before we start bringing this to a close, let's think about one more thing. Now, the term validation comes up a lot in these videos because it ties in so much with the motivation behind doing creative things. So here's a question I want you to think about. Is doing things for the validation of other people necessarily a bad thing? Because I've put it in quite a negative light in some of these previous videos, especially the imposter syndrome one. But a point I really want to get across is that nothing is ever completely black or white. There are exceptions to everything, and you need to be able to take ideas and know when they do and do not apply to your own life. Context is key. So is searching for validation a bad thing? No, in fact, I think it's probably a cornerstone of our interactions with each other. We are social and arguably quite tribal creatures. Searching for validation is a way that we can know that we're doing things that other people agree with and that we're part of a group. And I think being part of a global international group is a good thing. And in the hunt for validation, we can quite often make mistakes and learn from them and know what other people think is good and what is bad. Searching for validation is also a way to learn about ethics and morality in some situations. And it's all part of one big learning process for maturing as a human being. So I don't think that hunting for validation is inherently a bad thing. But I think it can lead to some negative side effects when we're not expecting them. So if there's anything I want you to take away from this rambling of a video, it's be aware. I feel like that's the tagline for all of these discussion videos now. Be aware of this, but understand there will always be exceptions. Okay, now we're rounding this up, we're going to take a moment to talk about the only sponsor I've agreed to partner with on this channel so far, which is Sketchfab. You may already know Sketchfab for providing the best 3D model viewer for the web, but you might not know that they actually have an online store for buying and selling 3D models. You can use the built-in model inspector to preview the geometry of the mesh, along with all the textures so you know exactly what you're getting. There's a wide variety of content available and a good number of dedicated artists providing high-quality content. If you're interested in maybe selling your own models on the store, then you could also consider applying to become a seller. So thanks for sponsoring this video, Sketchfab, and thanks to all of you for watching. Hopefully this video got you thinking and interested in the subject. And as I say, I highly recommend you go and watch the TED Talk by Derek Sivers and maybe pick up his book. This is not sponsored, I just think it's really interesting. You will find such gems in here as The Day Steve Jobs Dissed Me in a Keynote. So yeah. So thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you're doing well and you're staying safe, and I will see you next time. So do I have a solution for you? No, I don't. I'm sorry.